Welcome to our City Council work session. First of many that we're going to have on the FY23 budget. The time is 2:07 p.m. on this 16th day of 2022, August 2022. I'm getting a little bit of an echo. I don't know if that's because we've got an extra microphone on somewhere. Can we resolve that before we start? All right, testing 1, 2, 3. I think we're getting the audio from Phyllis right now. We don't need to be doing that at the moment.
Just turn Phyllis off.
Phyllis, can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yes, I was on mute, but I can still hear the echo.
Okay. Phyllis, could you try muting?
I am on mute.
No, we can hear you.
No.
All right, check 1, 2. No, we're still getting the echo. All right. Hang tight. We haven't officially started yet, so we're still early.
Perfect.
Hear you. I can turn on TVSA on another.
No, you're good. We're good now.
Okay,
We're good.
Resolve the echo, John. So we're good to go?
Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Maybe you give us some and see what we get.
All right, check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right, we'll need to pull that up when she's on. Okay. All right, the time is 10:12 p.m. We'll call our meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you read the roll?
Councilmember Bravo.
Here.
Councilmember Mickey Rodriguez.
Present.
Councilmember Villagran is here virtually. Councilmember Rocha Garcia.
Here.
Councilmember Castillo.
Here.
Councilmember Cabello Haverda.
Here.
Councilmember Sandoval.
Here.
Councilmember Pelaez. Councilmember Courage.
Present.
Councilmember Perry. Here. Mayor Nierenberg.
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum.
All right, we have one item on our agenda today. Actually, we have two items. We are going to swear in our new Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Castillo, if you could approach the podium with our clerk.
Raise your right hand. In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, I, Terry Castillo,
In the name and in the authority of the state of Texas, I, Terry Castillo,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully
that I will faithfully
execute the duties of
execute the duties of
the office of Mayor Pro Tem,
the office of Mayor Pro Tem,
City of San Antonio,
City of San Antonio,
from August 16th, 2022
from August 16th, 2022
through October 24th, 2022.
through October 24th, 2022.
The state of Texas,
The state of Texas,
and will to the best of my ability
and will to the best of my ability
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the United States and of this state.
of the United States and of this state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Awesome.
All right, we do have one presentation today that will kick off the start of our 2023 budget conversation, so let me turn it over to City Manager Eric Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So as the Mayor mentioned, we have one topic on today's budget work session, and it's on the CPS customer energy credit issue that was included in last week's proposed budget. Troy is going to walk us through the presentation and the details this afternoon. And Rudy is here from CPS, and we'll say a couple of words to set up the afternoon's discussion. I do want to reiterate what I said last week. The staff and I went through a pretty deliberate internal process to evaluate the matter in order to develop the recommendation that we gave you last week. And our recommendation takes into account the source of those funds, and that's a critical aspect as you heard last week and as part of the conversation, and undoubtedly will be part of your conversation today. Those conversations internally with us, as well as with CPS, was to ensure that we were any alternative that we proposed to the council treated CPS customers equally and uniform in accordance with state law, and those alternatives were also developed in the recommendation to take into account the regulatory environment that CPS operates within, and that the council has rate-making authority in. So with that context, we'll kick it over to Troy to go through the presentation. Troy?
Thank you. And good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members. My name is Troy Elliott. I'm the Deputy Chief Financial Officer. And I have the distinct pleasure to kick off these budget workshops, being the first one out of the gate, to talk about the customer energy credit. For purposes of the presentation overview, plan on really hitting kind of three primary areas. Focus on why we have the unusually high city payment revenues. I'm going to walk you through a series of slides that focus on fiscal year 2022, kind of giving you a look at where we were with the adopted budget and where we ended up based on our forecast and how we got there. Also taking you back and looking at kind of the current fiscal year 2022 forecast, looking back historically how we compare to try to give you some context. Focus then, kind of turning over to focusing on our budget recommendation, talking about how we arrived at this recommendation, some of the factors that we considered, and how we're going to allocate it, and also give you a deeper look into the residential credit, how that's being allocated, as well as the commercial credit as well. And then wrapping up with our recommendation and those factors that we considered in putting this recommendation together. So this first slide, as I mentioned, is going to focus on fiscal year 2022. Last September, we presented and the council adopted a budget for CPS in the tune of $361 million. So in looking at this chart, you have really three line graphs. The adopted budget is going to be represented in blue. Our trial budget is going to be represented in the orange line. Then you're going to have the upper one, which is a black line that's going to represent the summer update or the relook. When we adopt the budget, we look at a lot of different factors in coming up with our estimate. We're looking at past weather patterns and also assuming that they're going to continue to be normal throughout the future when we develop our adopted budget. We're also looking at historical fuel prices and where they were. And so, for example, in this budget, we looked at somewhere below $4, roughly $3.52 average per MMBTU in developing this adopted budget of $361 million. We also work with CPS. We look at their generation forecast, fuel type and utilization, and also system growth. So in looking at the adopted budget of $361 million, just focusing on that bottom line for a second, each one of those dots for each of the months is going to represent our expectation where we thought we were going to end up in terms of a city payment. Moving to the yellow line or the orange line, when we looked at our trial budget, come March, we had 6 months of history behind us. But at that time, fuel prices were also increasing. We also had the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, which influenced those fuel prices as well. So we started seeing that increase, and we redid our estimate at that point in time, looking at those increased fuel prices, and looking at the first 6 months and where we thought we were going to end up in the forecast, following that normal trend line through September, we were expecting an additional $35 million. Come June, as we got closer to the proposed budget for 2023, we took another look. Fuel prices continued to escalate, and also we had some of the hottest months on record in terms of weather, in terms of heat, being kind of the May, June, and July timeframe, experiencing in excess of 50 days of near 100 or over 100-degree weather. Combine that with fuel, based on our projections through September, actuals potentially through June, another $40 million for a total of $75 million over and above our expectations for the adopted budget, for a total of $436 million. Showing a slightly different look, looking at the FY22 update, which is that second bar from the right. The $436 million is what I just presented as far as our forecast. When you look at that historically for the past 5 years through 2017 in terms of the city payment, the city payment for those past 5 years was pretty much in line. The anomaly is 2022, based on what I just talked about. When you compare it to those historical averages or those historical revenues, we are about $83 million, for example, above 2021. So just by looking at this visually, the $436 million is unusual and extraordinary in terms of the amount of payment that we received as a result of our 14% for 2022. Also wanted to show you for comparison our projections for the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget. We're estimating $391.8 million. That's being developed similar to what I just talked about developing the 2022 budget last September, looking at those same factors. We're anticipating that to a certain extent, weather will normalize, fuel prices will remain high, but come down slightly in developing that $391.8 million proposed budget. I think this next slide really kind of shows where we experienced the increase in our payments. This is going to show our summer monthly city payment comparison. This is taking a slightly different look at the historical average. For example, we're looking at the 5-year historical average by month. So that first bars to the left for May, the historical average for May, looking at the last 5 years from 2017 is $25 million. Comparing that to the amount that we received this May due to the heat and fuel prices, it increases $8 million to $33 million. Likewise, June and July, comparatively, based on the historical average, are $13 million above and beyond the historical average. August is $10 million above that average, and we're expecting $9 million for September. So roughly $53 million of the surplus that we received is coming through May through the end of the year based on the actuals we received as well as the forecast. So I think this kind of reiterates, due to the high heat, high temperatures, this is truly an anomaly and a surplus, and wasn't really intended to be a windfall for the city in terms of excess revenue. This slide you saw as part of the proposed budget, kind of switching gears right now, focusing on our proposed budget recommendation. In putting it together, the $50 million that we're proposing, $5 million of that would go to assist our eligible low-income residential customers in being placed into the REAP program, otherwise known as the Residential Energy Assistance Partnership. And just kind of focusing on that program for a minute or two, the REAP program basically helps are customers who are most in need. Those low-income residential customers at or below 125%, but may also be senior, elderly, disabled, they may have small children, or they may also have critical equipment that they need to keep running during the summer to make sure that they stay healthy. As from a programmatic standpoint, this results in 2 credits on a bill up to $400 for the REAP program at a maximum of $400 per year. The last item, and I'll go into more detail in the next couple of slides and expand upon, is the $45 million that we're recommending as far as a credit to all CPS Energy customers, and that all CPS Energy customers, I'm talking about residential, commercial, inside the city and outside the city. So how did we come up with the allocation? What was our methodology? One of the foundational pieces we looked at is we wanted to determine a way that fairly credited back based on the way it was earned, based on the way we earned it, and based on the way the customers paid it. So looking at, as I mentioned, May, June, and July are some of our hottest months. July bill usage being one of the highest utilizations, we're going to return this and allocate it based on that July bill utilization, which provides our basis for the credit and the allocation. So when you look at July bill usage and you look at residential versus commercial, the residential credit is going to approximate about $26 million, roughly 55.6% of the entire credit of $45 million. And the commercial credit roughly estimates or approximates about $19 million, or 44.4% for a total of the $45 million. We're proposing that this credit be applied to our customers' bills in October. To do that, we'd have to make a decision fairly soon. We'd have to be able to give CPS an opportunity to actually program their systems to be able to credit this bill back on the October bills and prepare for that. As I mentioned, this includes all CPS Energy electric customers, being inside the city, outside the city, residential, and as well our commercial. Giving you a little different look or giving you a deeper look into the residential side, prepared 3 tiers to kind of show you what the average credit would be based on the July usage in terms of kilowatt hours. So as I mentioned, the total residential credit's about $26 million, or 55.6%. The total number of bills in this residential class is 834,000. This will result in an average residential bill credit of $31 for our residential customers. So just walking through the table real quick, looking at, for example, starting on the left with the July usage in terms of kilowatt hours, walking through the ranges. If you have a maximum of 1,000 kilowatt hour utilization, your July total bill would estimate or approximate $141. You get a maximum credit of $19. This represents approximately 13.4% of the bill for July, and 27.3% of the bills are 228,000 customers. Going to the next tier, in increments of 1,000, if you had a usage of 1,000 to 2,000, you would have a July total bill range of $141 to $285. This results in a credit range of $19 to $38, and again, 13% credit of the July bill, or 42.3% of the bills, representing the majority, or 353,000 of the residential bills. The last tier, we aggregated in terms of an additional 2,000 in terms of range for kilowatt hours, from 2,000 to 4,000. Your July bill, total bill, as far as a range, would approximate about $285 to $574 from a maximum, would result in a credit at the low end of $38 and the high end of $76 as far as a maximum. Again, 13% of your July bill and approximately 232,000 customers. Moving on to the commercial class, and I had some questions about this from a variety of council members. The credit as a percent of the July bill amongst all classes is going to approximate about 13%, in this case 13.3% for the commercial class. Looking at each of the variety of classes, the small businesses or the small commercial class approximates 85 or 86,000 bills. Based on those bills, they would receive an average bill of $849, would have an average credit of $113. Based on as you move down the commercial classes, these are going to be your larger users, from large lighting, extra power, super large, and the large power time of use. Going to large lighting, the number of bills dropped substantially, but they're going to continue to be higher demand and higher utilization. Have 1,837 bills, roughly an average bill of $16,410. As their bill goes up, their percentage of that bill is going to go up, and they're going to get larger credits. So in this case, they would get approximately an average credit of $2,188. Again, all the way 13% across the board average credit with the July bills. As you move to the extra large and super large powers, the number of bills continue to decrease. The average bills are going to go up substantially based on their usage of power. And their average credit is going to increase from $17,452 or $100,000 based on the size of their average bill in July. You know, one of the things as staff, as we were looking at this, you know, we considered several factors. You know, as I mentioned, it was never expected that as a city, based on our adopted budget, that we would experience a high heat and also the increase in the fuel prices based on those charts I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. This truly is unusual. It's one-time in nature and should be spent on one-time things. And based on that one-time in nature, we felt that this should go back to the people who spent the money in July and the way we collected it. We also considered the current high inflationary environment. Based on everybody in their everyday lives, going to the pump, it's costing them more for gas. It has gone down a little bit at the pump, but still higher. The amount that we pay for groceries and the amount that we pay on our electric bill. So based on the current high inflationary environment, our thought was to give some of this money back in terms of a credit to assist with that. As I mentioned, we had the high natural gas prices and extreme heat impacting all CPS Energy customers, providing assistance for low-income ratepayers to the tune of $5 million to the REAP program. And then one of the other items that we considered is really the boundaries that we have to work within in terms of a regulatory framework. And based on those boundaries and based on those regulatory framework, that all ratepayers have to be treated equally and uniform, wanted to determine a way that we could fairly credit back to all those CPS Energy customers in the same way it was collected, and uniform and equally to all inside the county, outside the city, being the county, inside the city, in our suburban municipalities, as well as our residential and our commercial consumers. And also, we're very fortunate today to be in a favorable financial position. If we were not in that favorable financial position, we may be providing a different recommendation here today. So in summary, as I started the presentation, our recommendation is to provide a customer energy credit, $45 million to all CPS electric energy customers. Also provide the contribution of $5 million to the REAP program to assist our low-income customers. And also with the addition of that $5 million, also revise the guidelines that I mentioned to be able to provide additional flexibility for low-income customers to be able to access these funds potentially more than twice a year or above and beyond the $400 maximum limit. And then additionally, in wrapping up, I think at the council meeting last week, several of you discussed the need for looking at guidelines as we move forward. That would be something else that potentially we can look at that would be quite complex. Mayor, that concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it over to Rudy Garza to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy, and thank you, Mayor, council members, for inviting us to participate in this conversation today. I want to start off by, obviously acknowledging the coverage on this conversation over the last, 24 hours or so. I want to begin by ensuring you that Eric and I have been, involved in the conversation about these funds from the get-go. He has sought our input, and we've given it as to, the options and how to, put together a program that's meaningful. I do believe that Eric is focused in the right space of creating equity and, giving all customers, the same benefit of, how these dollars were brought in. So the alignment is there, and I appreciate Eric giving us a chance to weigh in as these recommendations have been developed. A lot of good ideas that have come out. I was paying attention to the last council session, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness. Ultimately, these are city revenues that were derived from CPS Energy, but council's in a, it is difficult, to wade through, what's right for our community in terms of how these dollars are spent. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness that this body has weighed in on this. We've had our own difficult credit, experience after Uri, but I think this is something different. When in talking to Eric about this idea, it's easy to explain to customers that we're giving it back, the city's giving it back the way, that the revenues were derived, and, CPS Energy ultimately in that scenario would be the instrument to do that. And, to the extent our involvement is appropriate, we'll do our part to be good partners as you would expect us to be. The last thing I want to say is that I appreciate, one of the things that we have spent some time talking about are the regulatory implications of how, these funds are dealt with to ensure that the protection of CPS Energy's public power business model, it's an important thing to think about. We want to make sure that all customers, inside city, outside the city, that are in our service territory, feel like they, were part of, what the benefits of these dollars bring about to the community. And so I just want to acknowledge that I think it's certainly important to us that our business model here in San Antonio is protected, and I know it's equally important to you because I know the revenues that I'm responsible to delivering back to the city of San Antonio on behalf of our community are important, and I take that responsibility seriously. I think this is, as Troy has explained, is an extraordinary year in terms of the volatility we've seen in the gas market that are by and large are driving these revenues. But again, CPS Energy's here to answer questions. We're going to be partners in whatever the solution is, and we look forward to answering your questions today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Troy, and thank you, Rudy, and CPS for being here today. Based on prior conversations, I think as much back and forth as there has been over the last several days, one thing is very clear, and that this city council wants to do the most good for San Antonio residents, especially those who have been struggling and have been hit hard by high energy costs throughout the summer, whether that's through the mail in their CPS Energy bill, or that's at the pump, or any other of the many ways that inflation has impacted them. How we get there, of course, will be fleshed out both today and in the coming weeks as we dive into the budget process. Let's acknowledge the fact that it has been a very warm summer, a sweltering summer, and we want to ensure that our endeavors, both in sustainability and affordability, are fully supported by the path that we choose to create for this additional CPS revenue. That said, I want to be clear that I support continually investing in resiliency and sustainability initiatives while respecting the fact that the ultimate owner of our energy utility is our San Antonio public. So on that note, I do have a few questions. The first is, and I think this is probably most appropriate for you, Rudy, the City Council gave its thumbs up, as well as the CPS Energy Board, to the new STEP program just a month or so ago. When do we expect the initial $75 million that the Council just approved to be depleted?
So we're at the very early stages of trying to get all those programs together. Right now, again, we had to put all our procurement processes on hold to ensure that we got a positive outcome of the board and council vote, and that was not an easy conversation. Last board meeting, we got the board to approve our commercial and residential energy efficiency contracts that allow us to get those going. This board meeting, we're going to ask our board for an extension of our existing contract for a year on our weatherization program, so we can keep the weatherization programs going while we restructure those programs. Right now, it's kind of an external vendor that markets and administers the program for us. Our board is focused on taking those subcontractors to our vendor and making them prime contractors to CPS Energy as a business development and job creation opportunity. So that takes a little bit of doing. We got a lot of procurement work to do there. And once we get kind of the baseline of our of our STEP program, which is energy efficiency and weatherization, we will start the process of creating our new kind of innovation programs. And what that looks like, Mayor, we're going to try, and again, you know, I want to reiterate to council that I heard every one of you on the expectations of what you want CPS Energy to do in approaching our new program. We're actually going to bring in vendors, we're going to bring in customers, we're going to bring in folks who are interested, for instance, in community solar, and we're going to allow the public to help us, you know, package some of these new programs so that we get it right. You know, rather than think we know everything there is to know about what our customers want, we're going to actually put some focus groups together as we're, you know, creating these new programs. So I am hopeful that that work will happen this fall, and that probably in the November timeframe, I'm thinking we'll talk to Chairman Courage and members of the Municipal Utility Committee. But I'm hopeful to get an update to the council once we get some of these initial procurement items through the board, and then we start the process of getting the new programs together.
Great, thank you. So I think it's important that we respect the fact that there has been a lot of pain in our community that has resulted in this source of revenue. And we have to acknowledge that fact in what we're discussing to do with that money. I think there's been great discussion about the importance of resiliency and help making sure that we bake that into our processes going forward. But when it comes to relieving the immediate impact, there's also been important, appropriate discussion about equity and how we, you know, this money came from ratepayers. How do we ensure that it goes back to ratepayers who have been deriving this revenue, and as much as we can possibly do that in an equitable manner given our regulatory framework. And I know that can be tricky, but can someone speak to how we're able to allocate a portion of this revenue, the $5 million, to REAP, so that we, you know, we can contribute to a program that helps targeted towards low-income customers?
Mayor, I'll jump in. I know Troy's on the other side of the pillar, but the reason why we recommended the $5 million allocation to REAP was because REAP is already an established program that exists, that has guidelines, and we felt like that provided that basis for that recommendation rather than creating new programs. So we wanted to make sure that we still operated within that framework that already exists. So that was the basis of that recommendation.
Well,
Okay.
Mayor, I just want to add to that, in partnership with the gesture, if this body ultimately votes to do that, CPS Energy is also going to set aside some additional revenues to make a donation of our own to REAP. You know, in addition to, you know, new revenues coming in to help those most in need, hopefully next month we're going to present an item to the REAP board, which is obviously made up of myself, yourself, and Judge Wolf, and ask for the ability to do an additional payment to those eligible for REAP, so that we can try to cut into those past due balances to the maximum extent possible. That'd be kind of a one-time exemption that we're going to ask the REAP board for, but we believe that'll go a long way towards helping those who are still behind.
Well, and let's be clear that the vast majority of the additional bill payment is now sitting in the form of gas profits that won't be returned back to customers regardless of what we decide today. What we're talking about is the additional revenue that is part of the 14% increment that the city of San Antonio receives. And I'm not going to speak for anyone around this dais, but we've had enough conversations now about equity and about the hardest hit customers in our community, the residents who are in arrears, who frankly, without some form of assistance, will never get back to par. If there was a way within the regulatory framework that we could provide targeted relief to them first, we would do that. But we are working within an existing framework. So what I would like for us to explore, and what I think would help solve that issue, because there are a lot of members of our community who, if this rebate comes back to them, will say, you know what, I don't need it as much as our residents. I don't need it as much as, you know, other folks do, would choose to give it over to them, or would choose to be part of a program in which they were helping those who needed it the most. Is there a possibility of providing an opt-out for the rebate so that it could go into a REAP program or something similar?
Mayor, the answer to that question is yes. The logistics of making that happen, we got to work through, and the timing of it, because it's a fairly manual process for us to do that. But in theory, the way it would work is we'd issue the credit. We would communicate with the customers that there's an option to opt out and redirect those funds to REAP. And then we would go through manually, customer by customer, who makes that decision and basically make that debit over to the REAP program. So we can do it. It's going to take some work, but my team is committed to figuring it out.
Well, I know you've solved tougher challenges than that, so I have faith that you can come to a solution on that. So let me just summarize where I am in this in a couple of ways. We're a body of 11 people. I think there's probably 20 ideas on the additional revenue at this point. Where I start on this is that this was a windfall derived from extremely high energy costs that were borne onto the ratepayers or residents of San Antonio. They need to be considered because it's their money in what we do with that revenue. That's why I have supported this rebate. My challenges with the rebate, though, of course, are that it's really not targeted to the people who need that assistance the most. So if we were able to accomplish that, Rudy, I think that will help with that situation, because I know there's a lot of folks out there who feel the same way about this. The other issue that we've identified, and I think several folks have spoken very eloquently about, is the fact that this is not, from a weather standpoint, from a climate standpoint, this is not an anomaly. We have to expect these kinds of weather events. Whether or not they result in the high gas prices, et cetera, we don't know. But this is not something that we can just forget about in a couple of years and it's gone in distant memory. So how do we program ourselves to deal with issues of resiliency in a better, more comprehensive way than we've done before? I'm not going to speak to Councilmember Sandoval's proposal. That's for another day. But that's why I support having an ongoing, dedicated source of revenue. If we are in a climate emergency, as folks have said, and as I have said, then we need to consider it part of the operations that we deal with that. One-time sources of revenue are not going to solve our challenge. So anyway, I'm looking forward to the conversation. And let me start with Councilmember Villagran, and then we'll go to Councilmember Bravo.
Thank you, Mayor. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm glad we have this as our first conversation. Is there any way if we decide to move forward with a credit, some sort of credit, can it be done in December instead of October if we push it down the line?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so there's no reason we have to do it in October.
No, the September 1st date I gave council last week was because of the October proposed credit date.
Okay, I think December would probably be better around Christmas time if we do decide to go in that direction. Here are my thoughts. This is the budget for the city of San Antonio, not the budget for the ratepayers of CPS Energy. The other thing is, while 26 million will be going to households, the 19 million that will be going to commercial in the business class, I have lots of questions about, because as a city where we prioritize living wages and equity and things like that, I see at least 40 businesses getting over $100,000, but yet we don't know who those businesses are, if they would self-identify as who they are getting that, because I'd like to know who they are and if they provide livable wages and if they believe in equity and what's their diversity inclusion, because those are our priorities. And we have a budget, and while this is a windfall, I do agree with Councilman Bravo in that we needed to predict or forecast better. And we don't need to go into why the shortfall was 75.1 million. but I think we need to understand that we need to prepare for hot days and we need to prepare for freezing winters. And how are we going to do that? CPS Energy did what CPS Energy was created to do, which is they participated in this Texas market that's unregulated, and we made quite a bit of money. Uh, and San Antonio benefited from that. So I am very interested in Councilwoman Sandoval and Councilman Bravo's proposals. Again, I know other people have other ideas. I think we need to look at the budget as a whole first, before we take this out to the citizens and tell them, because I know if you told my citizens, you can either get a $29, because my residents will only get max $29, not the 31. And that'll probably pay for their solid waste fees, environmental fees that they have to pay for other things. So if I tell my district residents that you can either get a $29 rate, a rebate from SAW, or you can get another ACS officer, that's going to be another conversation. So I think we need to get out to our budget surveys before we make this, our budget town halls before we make this decision. I think we need to look at the budget and have the departments present before we make this decision. And I do not see that there's any rush where we have to do this now if we can give them their rebate in December. So those are my thoughts. I look forward to hearing from my council colleagues. And again, as a reminder, I've got over 2,000 customers eligible for disconnection. My priority is trying to help them. And I just want to give a shout out to the crew team and the community engagement team. And I hope, Rudy, that with whatever profits you made from this, that you are compensating them, because they're the ones out there trying to get our residents on payment plans and trying to get them help. So those are my thoughts, and I look forward to hearing from my council colleagues.
Thank you, Councilmember Villagrán. Councilmember Bravo.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, when I got the news that we were going to have a surplus of an additional $50 million that was not already allocated into the budget proposal, the first thing I thought is, how do we help save people money based on this? And the other thing I think about is, how do we improve our community long term? And I've actually started meeting with members of the business community and to talk to them about what their vision for their city is. What is their vision for economic development for our city? And, you know, we have conversations about how quality of life matters. You know, if our kids grow up and go off to college, you know, what are we doing in our city to make sure that they want to move back here? What kind of quality of life are we offering? What are we doing? You know, after the pandemic, it's also a new normal, right? Where people can work remotely, you know, there are people who are young and talented, and they can choose to work anywhere they want in the world. And so why are they choosing San Antonio? What are we doing to make sure that we're a world-class city that's globally competitive with a great quality of life? And one of the conversations I had was with Jenna Salcedo with Greater SATX, which used to be the Economic Development Foundation here for San Antonio. And she said, if we invest in our people and our place, we will be able to secure top quality jobs. And I think that, you know, my alternative proposal that I've put forward really invests in our place long term. And I think there've been some great ideas that have come together that other people have put forward. Councilwoman Sandoval put together an idea, and what I really like about her proposal was that we're leveraging funds from the federal government. You know, the federal government just passed the Inflation Reduction Act. That's $700 billion. And what is going to make us competitive to go after a lot of those funds that have to do with resiliency, that have to do with energy efficiency? And one thing, you know, and I've actually over the weekend, I talked to a couple of members of Congress, and I was told that one thing that makes us competitive is showing that we're doing the work ourselves. and showing that we're going in, that we're doing, we're going above and beyond what some other people, how can we stand out? And so with this proposal, we can stand out and we can show we're doing the work. But it also, what we also we're going to need is we're going to need matching funds. And these funds can be used to leverage as matching funds for those grants that we can go after from the federal government. So I know that some people are interested in investing these dollars in infrastructure, and I understand that. I hear from people about wanting their sidewalks replaced. I hear from them about not having sidewalks and wanting sidewalks. I got a text message this morning from a woman in my district who wants to know when her streets are going to be repaired. And I hear you. But we just passed a $1.2 billion infrastructure bond. And those projects were the priority projects, right? So the city made recommendations. We appointed citizens to different committees, and they looked at each of these projects, and they made changes to them to make sure that the community's priority projects were what we were putting forward. So if we were to go and spend $50 million now on additional infrastructure projects, we're going to jump the line. We're going to say, you know what, that $1.2 billion in infrastructure projects that the community said were priorities, we're going to put other projects in front of those, and we're going to push some of those back. We're going to delay them, and then they're going to be, with inflation, those projects are going to shrink because we're going to have to do these projects now. And I don't think it makes sense to jump the line. Furthermore, I really want to see, the reason the mayor mentioned natural gas prices. Yes, natural gas prices are twice what they were last year. And that's part of the reason why people's energy bills have been so high. But if you look at their June bill, if you look at, bills were up exactly 50% over the previous year. And 41% of that price increase, that cost increase of that bill, was because natural gas prices were twice as high. But even more, 49% was because people were using more energy. And so, again, I disagree with Troy. I disagree with our city manager, respectfully, that, this is not an anomaly. This is something that we're going to continue to experience at different levels. It might not be quite as bad next year. It might be much worse. But we're going to see more of this. And we would not have these funds if it was not for the fact that we had such a severe summer, and we should invest these to protect CPS Energy customers from high bills and to protect our community. Can I ask you all to bring up the poster on heat? Can we queue up? That I had submitted. You don't have it? Okay. Well, I'm going to read it. Every City of San Antonio employee got this email this morning. It says, keep cool and stay hydrated, spot the signs of heat stress, heat stroke, inability to think, lack of sweat, passing out, call 911 immediately. These are all the signs of heat stroke and heat exhaustion. This is what our city is messaging to us today. And this is the new normal for our summers. And we really need to protect CPS Energy customers from extreme weather. And so that's what I'm proposing. How does this go back to ratepayers? If we help low-income ratepayers with weatherization, that reduces the amount of energy that our peak energy demand for our community, and that then allows us to go sell more energy on the Texas grid, like Councilwoman Villagran was talking about. If we do that, we can profit off of high prices, and if we do that, that means it's less likely that CPS Energy is going to come back to us and ask for another rate increase. And so everybody saves. right? Because CPS Energy told us when we approved the last rate increase, they didn't say this is just one rate increase that we're coming to you with. They said we're coming to you with 4 rate increases over 2 years, right? And so if the next rate, is that right, Rudy? Oh, 3, I'm sorry, I apologize. 3 rate increases over the next 2 years. So we've done 1. Oh, 6, sorry. Okay, anyway, my numbers aren't right, but they did say that they're coming to us with 3 rate increases. So, you know, if the next rate increase was going to be for $3 and we prevent them from doing that, then, you know, that can save everybody $3 a month going forward. And if you look at how much the average residential ratepayer is going to get, you know, the highest that any council district, because we saw the breakdown, is I think Council District 9, the $34 in their first year. If we can avoid a $3 rate increase in their first year, they will save more than that $34, and they will continue to save every year going forward. And so I think that's important, and I think that we should avoid just when we think about how do we take care of our community, how do they benefit from this, we should avoid instant gratification by giving a one-time rebate on one bill, and think about long-term investments that move the needle on addressing a problem that everyone in our community shares. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Bravo. Councilmember Rocha Garcia.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate CPS Energy being here today. I was wondering if I could start off with questions to them. And Rudy, you mentioned that we're going to make a significant investment, it sounds like, in the REAP program yourselves. What is that overage that you're projected to make? What is your surplus?
Well, so remember, our budget year goes from Feb 1 to January 31, and we're right in the middle of our budget year. 40% of our revenues on an annual basis are derived from the summer. You know, so you got, you know, lower revenues in the shoulder months, you know, more revenues in the summer months. So, you know, we're actually, if you look at our wholesale revenues versus our retail revenues, we're kind of on target. You know, CPS Energy doesn't make profit. We pay for our operations. City of San Antonio earns the return. So you know, right now, out of the $240 million or so that we've brought in above projections, $200 million of that is fuel. So right now it's about $40 million, but, you know, again, you know, our plants, it's been a tough summer run season for our power plants. We've had issues here and there just from the extreme heat and mechanical issues that pop up when you're running your power plants more than you're anticipating. So I've got to take some of these revenues and invest them in you know, when we can start working on them again to make sure they're ready for the winter. So probably the last quarter of the year, which for us is, you know, January, December, November, probably in October, we'll kind of have a better handle of where we are on an annualized basis. But right now we're about $40 million up on retail revenues, but we're down on the wholesale side because, again, we have had some plant availability issues as we've, you know, kind of worked through the summer.
And then remind me, how much did you say you were going to invest in REAP? Did you give an amount yet?
Yeah, I mean, our goal is $1 million, you know, is $1 million, which is pretty significant for us. We typically make a $1 million donation to REAP every year. And so we'd be doubling, you know, our annual investment. You know, and again, I'll talk to the team. If we can do more, then we'll try to do some more.
Thank you, Rudy. And I appreciate that you all sent over the anticipated bill credit per council district. My residents in District 4, it looks like would get the second highest benefit. So that would be on average $32 a bill. And so for my residents, that's important. And I've heard loud and clear from my residents that they want that money back. And I understand that sometimes we have to delay gratification and not look at instant gratification, but my residents are just a few short dollars away sometimes from becoming homeless or from losing the ability to pay for utilities, et cetera. So I'm really taking that into consideration. I do understand that there's a lot of long-term investments that we could look at leveraging specifically, but I have to look at it from the point of view of my residents who on average make $18,500. And so a lot different than some of the other council districts' incomes, and that's what I'm focused on. I do think that we will need some additional money for projects based on inflation alone. So even as you figure out how to weatherize your area, right? So for possible, or for, we know for the upcoming winters, et cetera, we should probably be investing a little bit more in infrastructure, and I don't want to lose sight of that as we're thinking that we don't need additional money for bond projects. The reality is that we probably are going to be under budget. So I don't want to lose focus on that, and so I just wanted to remind you all as well as you thought of that. I do not know that we are equipped, and I think that the conversation has to be had about a policy about when this happens again, if it happens again. Is it we take a percentage of the funds and we invest it in the top 3 things that our residents are saying that year? Is that a policy that the council directs and says, if and when this happens again, we already have a game plan to spend this additional surplus budget? We weren't prepared for this, obviously, but we know that it may or may not happen. I'd like to have a plan B. Right? And so while I'm ready to support Eric's decision on giving this back and the credit to the residents, I wanted to make sure that we focused also on those top 3 needs. And my residents said a part of it was infrastructure, and that's why I worked with Councilman Perry on, if this doesn't, let's think about infrastructure needs of our community. But I also do think that we have the opportunity to benefit and maybe work together with you all, specifically with what happened today, and the benefits that the new opportunities that the federal government has literally less than an hour given us, right, afforded us. So just something to consider. But again, and I'd look forward to the conversation with my council colleagues about what to do next time and having that plan B so that we're not stuck in this position again. But I don't have any other questions right now, Rudy, so thank you. I appreciate it. I do also think that we should consider resiliency hubs in this. We don't necessarily think about resiliency in terms of infrastructure either, but resiliency hubs, how we can maybe incorporate that as we know that there will be more days of 100-degree plus by 2050, et cetera. So those are all my comments for now, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rocha Garcia. Councilmember Courage.
Thank you, Mayor. And it really is important, I think, for all of us to hear the different suggestions or thoughts that we're having about this issue. I want to thank Rudy for one of the quotes he gave. Ultimately, these are City of San Antonio revenues. Do we really want to give city revenues to individuals and businesses that are in the county? And that's what the proposal we have before us right now. Now, we're talking about roughly 70 million, but I want to know, and Rudy, maybe you can tell us this, could it be a little different because August right now is a little cooler than it's been, and maybe September might be? Could that revenue be less than 70 million or even more than 70 million?
Councilman, we're monitoring that closely as part of our assumptions. We are being moderately conservative, as we always are. And so we're looking at that. We have 2 months to go. Could it be a little less? It could be, but I don't have a crystal ball.
Right, okay. Now, let me ask you this, Troy. Last year, we made $11 million more than we had projected in our budget, I believe. And how was that spent? That was spent by a decision of the council, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did that trigger some kind of rate issue because the city council spent that $11 million and it was money that came from people who lived outside the city?
No, sir.
Okay. Because I understand that's a concern, that if we do something with this money, we need to do it for people who live in Bexar County and businesses that exist. But I don't believe we need to do that because this is city money, and we decide how we can benefit the residents and the citizens of San Antonio by using this money. So I don't think how we give this revenue should be a rate issue, particularly if we don't just give it back through CPS. Then maybe it could be a rate issue because what we're doing is we're having CPS give money, and if we only limited it to people in San Antonio, I could see where it might be a rate issue. But what if the city gives it back directly outside of CPS. So we're simply giving back our revenue to our citizens. And what if we did it in November or December, right before the holiday season, when you have to admit people want or value money much more then than they do in October or March or just about any other time of the year. Now, granted, if we issued those funds to people, and let's say my proposal is $75 to everybody in the city who has paid a CPS bill. If we do that, there's going to be a cost to us. It might cost us $1 million to send out checks to 570,000 people. But still, that money goes to people who live in the city, who need it and can use it, and at a pretty useful part of the year. Now, part of my estimate was we would go ahead and give city residents $75, and that would come to with about 570,000 residents that pay into CPS, about 42 million, a little more than that. That would still leave 7 or 8 million that could go into REAP, and it could benefit the REAP program, or could go into the CPS program on energy efficiency and help more homes be more energy efficient in the future. But I really have a problem giving $100,000 back to 40 businesses, or $17,000 plus back to 130 businesses, or nearly $2,200 back to almost 2,000 businesses, and in some cases $19 to somebody or $34 to somebody else. When we understand that those businesses are in business to do business, to make money, and all of their expenses are tax deductible. But the individual who gets the money back because they're a resident of the city, it's not a tax situation for them. It could be a matter of putting food on the table or buying a Christmas present for their children. So I think the value of that money to our San Antonio residents is much greater than the value to that money to other residents. But if we do end up having some money left over, $7 or $8 million, and we put that into the REAP program, I understand the REAP program helps anybody in the county. It's not just City of San Antonio. So indeed, others outside of the county who have the greatest need would get a benefit from some of that funding. But it would be because the city pays it to REAP and not because CPS reconfigures how it bills people. And so it shouldn't be a rate issue. I think that we really need to consider what is the most value to the people in our city. And you know as well as I do, $20, $25, $30, it could mean a lot to a lot of people who are in a tough situation. But I don't think anybody would say, oh, I don't want $75. And I don't think anybody would waste it. I think almost anybody in our city would feel that's a valuable return to me in a difficult period of time that they're all facing. We can't reduce their energy costs. Even if we deducted 13% or $34 from October's bill, doesn't make up for all the other months. But what we are saying is we could take $50 million and look at how we can return it to people in a way that they'll get a benefit from it that is of value to them. And why are we only talking about $50 million, Mr. City Manager? We're making $75 million by your estimate. So why aren't we saying let's return $70 million? Why is it only $50? And could we be giving everybody $100 come November, December, who's a resident and pays a utility bill in the city of San Antonio? So basically, I'm just saying I think these need to be considered a little bit more, and we need more time to make these decisions and look a little bit more diligently at all of the possibilities. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman, let me just respond to a couple of the points you made, just for context, because I know this is going to be a long conversation that may go beyond today's meeting. You know that our CPS revenue is one of the most erratic revenue sources or major categories. And so we are careful on how we budget, and we budget with the anticipation and the hope that as we do that, that we are 2, 3, maybe 4% over budget, and that helps us adhere to the financial policy that this council's had for the last 20 years to maintain a 2-year balanced budget. That effort, so when we compare to previous years, there has not been any other year ever where we are 21% over budget. So that's what distinguishes this year from previous years. Generally, those dollar amounts, those overages on CPS, again, the policy is that at the city is that we utilize that investment in one-time sources so that we're not using those peaks to pay for police officers or public works and that recurring operating expense. So, and that's why last week I do think, and I highly recommend that, and I think Councilwoman Rocha Garcia mentioned it, there does need to be some sort of policy level setting for us at some point to be able to accommodate that and provide some sort of roadmap. Again, we are betting we're 2, 3, 4% above. We're not betting that we're 15, 16, 21% above. Secondly, we, as I mentioned earlier, and Troy and Rudy mentioned, the regulatory environment that CPS operates in and the rate-making authority that the council has is not just for City of San Antonio residents. It is for CPS customers. And so under that thought and belief and reality, the recommendation I made was for all CPS customers. And I think we could probably talk more about the realities of that situation, and we can certainly do that. And then lastly, if the council chooses, I'll reiterate for the rest of the council, you mentioned the rest of the balance, $75 million is projected to be over. The recommendation was to use $50 million on the topic before you today. The other $25 million is spent in 3 areas. 1, not issuing debt on Edwards Aquifer next year and cash funding the continuation of that program at $10 million. 2, investing $9 million in an all hazards facility so that we have some inventory in times of emergency, which was a recommendation that came out of the Committee on Emergency Preparedness. And 3, a $6 million infusion on sidewalks. If the council wants to make adjustments to that in the proposed budget and amend this proposal before you, then that's before you. But that was the logic in my head, was that infrastructure was a priority. We had an outstanding recommendation from a community panel on emergency management. And we have a commitment that the council has already made when you created the Municipal Facilities Corporation to continue the Edwards Aquifer Protection Program and maybe not issue debt next year and just cash fund it, which was allowed and included in the policy that the council approved about 2 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Courage. Councilmember Cabello-Haverda.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the presentation. Rudy, did you say you annually allocate $1 million to the REAP program? Is that correct?
It's about 800,000, Councilwoman. Yes, ma'am.
About how many customers does that help?
Yeah, I don't know that for sure, but we'll
Okay.
get those numbers for you, ma'am.
Curious.
The benefit is $400, up to $400 annually, so we can do the math and back into it. But, we maximize the utilization of that REAP program every year. We've got some, kind of frequent flyers that, we go to and help, pretty regularly.
And they can come to you as many times as they need to, as long as they don't go over the 400?
Twice a year,
Oh.
for up to $400, right? Yeah.
Up to $400.
Yes, ma'am. And that's
total.
the exemption for this year that we're going to try to waive at the next board meeting, is to be able to give them, additional funds and one more payment to help them in the fall.
Okay. So potentially with another $5 million, you could increase the amount?
Yes, ma'am.
Or at least the
Yes, ma'am.
frequency with which?
We're still
they can-
working on the
Okay.
math, but yes, that's the idea.
The goal would be to increase that pipeline on that program, Councilwoman.
Okay. The $50 million, is that based, well, it's more than the 50, I know, but we're talking about $50 million. Is that based on actual revenue that's like in the bank right now? Or are you counting accounts receivable? Is that a guaranteed?
The majority of that money is going to be in the bank. We do have some estimates built in through the end of September.
Okay.
And so, but the majority of that money is in the bank currently.
Okay.
And I would like, I was talking to Patrick back here on the REAP program, and just to give you some context, the REAP program assists about 12,000 households annually.
12,000? Okay. Thank you. I've talked before about how we can, when it comes to extreme weather, we can only claim to be caught off guard once. And after the winter storm and the heat, the extreme heat of this summer, our constituents are expecting us to act. Extreme weather has become a public safety issue in our city. I never thought that that would be something I would say, being born and raised in this city, I never thought that we would have this extreme weather. One of the beauties of living in our part of the world is that we don't have historically this type of weather. So it's kind of I feel like we're approaching something we've just never really had to deal with that much. But I have spent a lot of time talking with the good people I represent on this particular issue, and especially since our last meeting. And I will say that over half support putting the money towards weatherizing homes. The other half, or the other 45% or so, requested the rebate. There was no support for any other idea. It was one or the other. I think, weatherization obviously reduces energy cost, eases the demand on our energy grid. And by some estimates, weatherization can reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 1 ton per weatherized household. There are many families with children, elderly, people with special needs, whose health and safety require that their house stay cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. The Community Action Corporation of South Texas has been weatherizing homes for several years. They estimate a savings of $413 for each weatherized home. So I asked a question about REAP because I wonder if that same 12,000 is about the number that we would be able to, or at least they would have access to potentially weatherizing their homes. There's a lot more that go into that. I understand, the condition of their homes in general. But it's worthwhile. I think it's worth exploring. I want to say as a caveat, if we as a council decide against directing funds towards a weatherization program, I would support the recommended rebate. I don't like the idea, all worthwhile causes that my colleagues have brought up, but I think that these funds need to stay in the energy lane, either towards energy efficiency or back to the consumer. Real quickly, I don't understand the benefit if we go the route of rebating to the consumer. I don't understand the benefit of delaying their payment. If we decide to give folks a rebate, I don't understand why we would delay it to December or even November. I trust the community to use their potential rebate as they see fit. Not make them wait because a holiday is coming up, some of whom don't even celebrate that holiday, by the way. So, I just think that if we go that route, we should do it up front, be expedient about it. I don't really understand that. But going back to the weatherization, I'd like to see if we can leverage some of this funding as well, and going back to the Community Action Corporation of South Texas and see how we can work with them to potentially make a bigger impact of the surplus funds. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Cabello-Havrda. Councilmember McKee Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start off by saying what I will be supportive of. So I will be supportive of a substantial targeted investment that is rooted in equity and justice. And right now, I'm inclined to believe that that means focused investment in sustainability and helping residents who will be impacted by climate change for years to come with no opportunity for relief in sight. I've spoken to many constituents who support weatherization or support some of the things that they heard on the dais as alternatives to the rebate. And the constituents that I've spoken with about the rebate who thought they'd be supportive of that didn't know how much they would get back, and they found it laughable when I did tell them how much it was. Many of them, I don't know where this came from, I don't know where they read it, but they thought that they might get the equivalent of a full bill, like the month of June. They thought it would be something substantial, some substantial amount of money, and it is not the case. And so for right now, I'm not supporting this rebate. I have a few issues with the current proposed plan, and if this is something that ends up happening, then I would like to see these issues addressed. So first, the amount proposed for the average ratepayer is minimal and for many not impactful given the exorbitant bill spikes they've seen this summer, particularly the fact that it's not direct relief. They cannot choose how they're going to spend this money. This money is basically ensuring CPS gets its bills paid. That's what it comes down to. This is not targeted relief for those that need it the most. everyone will get a rebate, including those not cost burdened and large businesses. So the top 40 users of electricity in July would receive an average of $100,000 each. And we shouldn't really be rewarding this behavior. Individuals who used more electricity and did not conserve energy over the summer would be rewarded with a higher rebate. And I think that is one of the fundamental problems here. Further, this is a credit and not direct cash assistance. This ensures the money will go back to CPS Energy as opposed to the ratepayers, who will not be able to use this for anything like gas, groceries, or other expenditures. And so if their October bill is higher than it was in previous years, they're only going to see a slightly less of an increase in their bill. They're not going to see a real reduction in their bill or how much they're paying this year. I also wonder, this would ensure that all $50 million goes back to CPS Energy, and I want to know, what would CPS do with this funding? You can answer that after I'm done with my series of things. This plan was conceived without, I also have a problem with the fact that this plan was conceived without the input of the city council. And I agree that there needs to be a policy discussion on whenever there is a major surplus of this magnitude. Council and our constituencies should be the first to process that and determine how we need these funds reinvested in our community. Investing in weatherization programs such as roof repair, air sealing, insulation enhancements, window repair, AC repair and replacement, and other impactful tactics would provide for long-term bill reduction for our constituents. And I would rather reduce a bill by $31 on average every month moving forward than do a one-time payment, which would realistically be a drop in the bucket. Bills are already at an all-time high, and all this proposed rebate would mean is a slightly lower bill for 1 month when we can and should be considering an opportunity to address how energy is conserved and how we invest in our communities for ongoing climate effects. I already mentioned the 40 users who will be receiving $100,000 or more. I agree with Councilman Villagrán. I would like to know, who are these people or entities? And this is another example of inequitable impacts when we do not implement equity or justice budgeting. The city hands over more money to the wealthy at the expense of those who need it most, and this is that. Earlier this year, I voted against the rate increase, and one could argue that this surplus essentially shows that we did not need to approve future increases, and our constituents can keep these funds in their pockets where they are most needed. We're currently existing within the effects of the ongoing climate crises, and we need to consider the possibility that this record-breaking summer will be the coolest summer for the rest of our lives. That is a very real possibility. Winter Storm Uri was traumatic for many, and I don't need to remind everyone how painful and terrifying that time was. And we're going to continue to see these major fluctuations in temperature and weather throughout the year. So we must be considerate of protecting our earth and our communities. A few questions. So one is, how much total revenue was collected by CPS Energy for these months, and how much of it was due to the rate increase? Second, the average resident of District 2 will be receiving a credit of $29. And that's an average, but I would be much more comfortable if you could provide us with the median for each district. And with medians, you get a better sense, without the data being skewed by any outliers or extreme variation, you get a better sense of what a majority of your constituents will be getting. Because it's very possible that many people will be getting less than $10 credits, less than $5 credits, and they might be the people who need the money the most. I also wonder, if we do a rebate, do we have to give those 40 businesses $100,000 each? And could we limit commercial class rebates to small commercial businesses? I'm also very interested in the state of CPS and the implications of the rate increase council approved earlier this year. And many of my constituents want to know is, can they still expect to be asked for a rate increase again in the next few years and several more following that? And lastly, message to my constituents, please bring your July bills to our budget town hall, and we will figure out exactly how much you can expect if we do choose to do this rebate, and maybe we can have some conversation about ideas for better uses. But for now, I would love answers to some of the questions that I just asked.
Councilman, there's a lot to unpack there, so what I'm gonna generally do is we're gonna provide a written response to you, and we'll share that with your council colleagues. I do wanna tackle the rate increase conversation, because on average, as we said, that 3.85% for most residents is about $3.85-ish, maybe $4. And over the course of the year, the rate increase probably is going to be about $50 impact. That regulatory asset, $1.26. So, that's another maybe $12 on the regulatory asset. So by and large, as we've communicated over and over again to the public, the drivers of the increase in revenue have been, the increase in natural gas costs coupled with the extreme heat. We've had, and you said it on record, the highest May, the highest June, the highest July. And every time I have addressed the public, I have acknowledged that we know this has been a difficult summer for our customers. So it is not the rate increase it's in its of itself that has driven, the impact. It's been the extreme heat and it's been the natural gas prices. So
So the question is more so knowing what we know now and looking at the revenue that we're looking at right now, was the rate increase necessary?
absolutely. That $75 million, give or take, that we expect is all going back into the infrastructure investment, the people, the growth in our community that hasn't slowed down. All of those, it's given us just enough breathing room to refocus ourselves on making our system more resilient. So the answer to your question is that rate increase was absolutely necessary in the moment, and we were putting it to use in exactly the way we told you we were going to put it to use. So yes, it would still have been necessary.
I got to bring you out to some neighborhood association meetings so you can explain that.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Councilman, the other thing is that, we started out at the District 10 Town Hall last night. CPS and SAWS have been there at all the town halls, and they have made arrangements to be there because there are going to be a lot of questions. But I did want to echo what Rudy said from the other side. The chart that Troy started off showing you in the presentation shows that our revenue started escalating really in May and accelerating in June and July. And that was independent of rates or any adjustments that were made earlier in the year. That was purely driven by the price of fuel and additional demand on the utility system, which had that impact.
I guess one of the bigger questions that I asked that hasn't been answered yet is that if we do a rebate, do we have to give, could we limit it to the small commercial businesses rather than the larger ones that will be getting tens of thousands of dollars?
Councilman,
anybody?
if I'm going to go ahead and interject here, just because that starts to lead to legal implications, and so we can have a broader discussion about that in exec session.
I would greatly welcome that, and I would have greatly welcomed it prior to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McKee Rodriguez. Councilmember Castillo.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Rudy and Troy, for the presentation. And I also want to express gratitude for Eli, our CPS outreach coordinator, who's been assisting our constituent services office in connecting residents to the much needed utility assistance, as well as to Rachel, who her specialty is housing and utilities with our office. What I've heard today is that we are going to see fairly credited back based on the way it was earned, right? But when we're talking about the way it was collected on an inequitable rate structure, that's far from equitable and that's far from just. As folks have expressed and showed that over how many businesses are going to receive over $110,000 in a rebate? About 40. And we need to acknowledge that many of these high energy users have already received a sweetheart deal, so they would be receiving a higher rebate than they've been paying into. So I want to be sure that we recognize that several of these census tracts with the highest residential CPS bill debt are District 3, 4, and 5. And when we look at District 5 in particular, we're looking at an estimated $28 rebate, right? And I want to ensure that when we talk about $28, this is $28, right? Folks have already paid their utility bill. So we want to ensure that we're being very impactful and intentional with this revenue to ensure that we help everyone long term. And I know a couple of council members have put forward these very innovative ideas on how to use this revenue. And when I listen to my District 5 constituency, the priorities continue to center around improving quality of life and housing affordability. And I do believe that there are opportunities and ways to use the 50 to 75 million to ensure that we both promote sustainability and resiliency. And as we know, when we have our housing briefings, according to UTSA and other energy modeling, residential weatherization programs like minor rehab, under one roof, can save a family up to 30 to 65 times more than $31 in the long run in reducing their energy bill. So I think that's something worth investing in. At the Economic and Workforce Development Committee, we've had conversations about bringing back Operation Facelift, and it is something that we've secured funding back, and there's opportunity for us to also help our small businesses keep their energy costs as low as possible as well. And that's also something worth investing in. So I know folks have maybe seen the national and the local articles highlighting the concentration of heat islands in District 5 and the inner city in particular. And I wanted to quote the New York Times to share a little bit about what folks are experiencing out in the community. So one of the excerpts is, not only can she, Miss Cruz Perez, not afford air conditioning during the hottest part of the day. She lives in the West Side, one of several parts of San Antonio, nearly all of them working class or poor neighborhoods, where there are few trees to provide shade. Simple things like venturing out into the backyard, walking to the store, or waiting for a bus can be dangerous. The heat is inescapable in the city's historic West Side, where the ratio of asphalt and green space, along with old structures, freight trains, and abundance of concrete, creates the kind of heat island effect that is known to lead to high energy consumption, more pollution, and a greater risk of related health problems. But some residents in the West Side have to take the bus to get to cooling centers, and with little shade, waiting for the bus can often be an excruciating experience. So this is the experience of folks out on the ground here in San Antonio, and not an experience limited to folks in District 5. And I also want to recognize that there are some dual income households, right, who may make a fair amount, but they have medical debt, student loan debt, and then the increasing rise of inflation all around that are being impacted by this as well. So I want to be sure that, you know, we're not just talking about our most vulnerable, though when we look at the rate structure and how we've accrued the funding, it is inequitable. So, you know, I think we have an opportunity to mitigate some of these impacts by investing more into tree planting, building shade in neighborhoods, at bus stops, and along major corridors, in addition to weatherizing our homes and investing in programs like Under One Roof. Right? And we'll not only help our residents use less energy and maybe rely on public transportation, but we can also save lives, right? As pointed, right, the city of San Antonio sent out a email letting folks know what heat exhaustion looks like. So we're also talking about folks potentially dying from this heat in their homes. And for my constituency, folks too afraid to turn on their AC unit because they have to pick and choose on what's a priority, food, medication, or having the air fan on. So at one point this year, the 78207 zip code has over 1,500 accounts who are behind an average of $1,150. So when we talk about a $28 rebate, that indicates that it's not really going to help my constituency catch up. And Rudy, I have a clarifying question. With the REAP program, online it says that it's a one-time opportunity to apply for $400 assistance rather. So is it twice or once can someone apply?
It's typically two payments of up to $200 each, so $400 total annually.
Okay. And you stated that CPS prioritizes $800,000 for the REAP program?
Excuse me, ma'am, I'm sorry, I was validating that I got it right. What was your question?
First question was, on y'all's website, it says your maximum assistance through the REAP program is $400 per year. But earlier you stated that it was twice that an applicant can apply for this funding. So is it once or twice or two?
It's twice, I'm sorry, yeah. The answer to that question is it's two payments of up to $400.
Of up to $400,
Yes,
well,
ma'am.
not $200, okay. So, you know, my concern with that is that if we look at the $800,000 that CPS on y'all's end dedicate towards the REAP program, that's only 2,000 families if it's a one-time assistance of $400. And when we look at one zip code in District 5 in particular, 78207, for example, one zip code could potentially absorb the majority of that funding. So my hope is that, I heard your commitment about nearly doubling the amount into the REAP program. I would hope on y'all's end that y'all could increase that funding and support as well. Again, your team's doing a great job at connecting our constituents to that funding, but we have so many families at risk of being disconnected. And these are also families that have, you know, critical care needs. So I guess my question is, can we potentially look at clearing the debt of folks who are behind on their CPS bill that are at risk of disconnections? Is that something that we've explored or can potentially look to see? Or potentially look at those on the critical care list who are at risk of disconnection? Do we have those numbers?
I don't know that we have those numbers handy. I think we can get them to you. Let me just make a point about REAP that I think is really important. The REAP is a partnership between us, the county, and the city. County puts money in. That money, generally goes to outside city customers. City puts money in, City of San Antonio, and the money CPS Energy puts in goes to everybody. That's available. So, I do think there's an opportunity for all of us, to come together to do more, and we'll talk to our partners about that. And we will get you the information on the number of critical care customers who are eligible for disconnect. So I don't have those numbers handy, but we can get that. Oh, you do? Oh, excuse me. My team has the numbers.
Sorry, hello, Deanna Hardwick. So we currently have, this is as of the end of June, we're still running July numbers, but as of the end of June, for customers that have some type of assistance program, so that's low-income medical or senior citizens, we had about 5,700 accounts that were eligible for disconnect, around $7 million.
And would it be possible for us to get an estimation of what it would look like to settle those, the balance that they have that's putting them at risk of disconnection? Would it be 800,000? Would it be 1 million, 5 million? What would that look like to
Yes, in total, it's $6.8 million.
$6.8 million to clear out the debt? I think, we're putting forward 5 million and CPS is looking at increasing the amount. I think there's opportunity for us to exceed the $400 to ensure that we allow folks to address their balance, right? Because again, for District 5 in particular, $28 is not going to settle that balance. And if we're looking at the amount that you just stated, I think there's an opportunity to clear it out and allow that our constituents can catch up. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Castillo. Eric, you want to jump in?
I just, the line of questioning from Councilwoman Castillo will work with the CPS staff, because I think also the suggestion you made about the critical care customers is also important. Because as we collect that, and we've been working with CPS to collect that at the Office of Emergency Management, and as Rudy mentioned during his part of the presentation, and the mayor mentioned, we're talking about amending the guidelines for REAP, whatever the dollar amount is, amending the guideline for REAP to do more, and we will work with CPS to follow up on the points you made and provide some sort of report back to the council.
Thanks, Eric. All right, I have nobody else in the queue, but I know this isn't the end of the discussion, so to my colleagues who haven't spoken yet, can you signal me? Just color me surprised if there's no hands. Councilmember Perry.
All right, thank you, sir. I thought ladies first, but okay, I'll take that. All right. I think what we need to do here is, and this presentation really didn't show it, Troy, the amount of money that we're talking about is not $50 million. It's a total of $75 million. And I guess I would have liked to seen this presentation based on $75 million on giving, because that was the number one option, give back a rebate to the customers. And that, to me, the $75 million should have been first and foremost. You could have broken it down saying, okay, we have these other requirements and what have you, and it's only $50 million with us doing these other requirements. But I would have liked to seen the figures as laid out in the proposal for $50 million for the full $75 million, and see what those numbers look like. So I'd really like to see those numbers laid out in these charts, because it is going to be more than the, we've heard $28, $31, that kind of thing. But I can tell you the input that I've gotten is people want their money back. Winter Storm Uri, going for days without electricity, and then getting charged for the makeup on that, plus a rate increase, plus this heat wave that we're having, and with the elevated bills out there, they're being overcharged. I mean, I look at it like this. If I go into a store and I get overcharged something, and I see it on my bill, I'm going to go back and get my money back. People are looking at this just like that. They overpaid, and they want their money back across the city. And no differentiation between the city and the county and the internal cities within the city, businesses. You know, everybody suffered, again, through Winter Storm Uri, rate increases, and this hot summer. Everybody's in the same boat. Nobody's exempt. Everybody is feeling that pain and has felt that pain in the past. I'm for giving the full rebate back to the customers so that they know that we're thinking about them. I cringe every time I hear, well, let's spend it on this, let's spend it on that. I had a community meeting last night, and just by people nodding their heads, and we had over 100 people there. Eric did a great presentation last night. So get ready. He does a great job on putting that budget out there. But the people's heads were nodding. Do you want a rebate back, or do you want the city to spend it? And looking across that community out there, people wanted their money back. Does it sound like a lot of money? I don't know what that amount is until I see what that full $75 million is. I won't know that. But that, to me, is the right thing to do at this point in time for our ratepayers for CPS. Rudy, I got a couple of questions for you also. I saw on an Express News article that you said, no, you shouldn't give the money back to folks. We should be doing other things with that money. Can you explain that a little bit more?
There were some pretty pointed questions at the editorial board yesterday. My experience with our bill credit program was that customers, generally, may not react positively to a $35 or an $8, in our case, bill credit, and I understand why. But again, with the logic that Eric is using here, giving it back the way you got it, that I can explain. And so, again, it's the will of the council ultimately on what we do here. But, we're still at CPS Energy going through a bit of PTSD on Winter Storm Uri, and my feelings about a credit are based on our experience, which was not real positive, Councilman.
Well, I'm just looking at it. It says that you said that there are better ways to utilize that money than a credit, but it's not my call. And yeah, it's up to the city council.
Yes, sir.
But can you explain that a little bit more? Why
I
not
think
giving
a lot,
that credit back
again,
to the customers?
They asked me those questions about 6 different ways, and I tried to, tap dance around them. There are many ways you all can choose to spend this money. None of them any less or more, noble than others. If council decides that a credit is appropriate, we will program that credit to the extent you want us to do that. So, again, I think it's just the way they characterized it may not have reflected the actual conversation, sir.
Yeah, and what I would like to see from CPS is what's your budget? What did you approve the budget as? How much revenue you've gotten, and where did that go to against that budget? And is there going to be any revenue left over at the end of the day? I know you said you're only about halfway through, and that's
Yes,
still.
sir.
But you said right now you're about
Yeah,
40
let me
million.
just clarify. Our budget is a cost, a cost-based budget. So, about $1.5 billion of our budget, it's non-fuel revenue. So that goes to pay our people to do the maintenance when storms come in and do preventive, stuff at the power plants. And we have about a $700-800 million capital program that we do to extend service to new areas, to replace poles, to string in new wire. When the city has a project, a capital improvement project, we got to move our stuff, and so that pays for that. So
Okay.
about $1.5 billion is just direct expense to run CPS Energy. About $500 million goes to debt interest costs on our debt, and the other $1 billion is fuel, which we earn 0% on.
Well, a while ago, you mentioned you're about $40 million ahead at this point, but you still got another half
Right.
year to go.
Yeah.
And I totally understand that. But again, I would like to see what the budget was approved at, what the revenue has come in at to pay off that budget. And you're talking about the pay, the maintenance, and all that. That should all been built into your budget already.
Well, again, sir, and I'll get Corey up here to walk you through it. We pay our expenses. We have a capital account that pays the equity portion of our CIP program. Basically, it's debt equity. We borrow some and we pay some out of our fund. We pay our debt expense, and then the city gets our 14%. Anything that's left over goes back into that, what we call our R&R account. That is our capital fund. So there's no money left over at the end of the day. We got a bank account that pays for investment, and we pay our expenses, and that's all we do with the money.
I refer back to that $40 million again. At the end of the day, I'd like to see at the end of your budget year, where did you end up? And was that $40 million carried over or added to some other account above and beyond your budget? And what I'm saying is that money also needs to be looked at to give back to the customers here in CPS. So I'm saying the $75 million here, that's above our budget, and anything that's above on your budget. So I just want to see
Our budget
see
works
your budget.
completely different than the city, sir, and we'll walk you through that.
I totally
Be happy to
understand
walk you
that,
through that.
and I
Yeah.
think everybody needs to take a look at that also.
Fair enough.
On where you are. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So with that, my recommendation is let's give the customers a break, the full $75 million, and let's not just look at ways to spend this money. It's not our money. It's the customer's money that overpaid. Like I said, and I didn't think this up. This was told me last night. He said, hey, if I overpay something, I expect a rebate back at any store or restaurant or whatever. I want my money back. And that's the way our customers are looking at this. At least mine are up in District 10. So with that, that's my comment, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Perry. Councilmember Sandoval.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks to all the council members for their ideas and their contribution to today's conversation. And Councilman Perry, I think I have a very good feeling of what that District 10 resident is like every time you tell us what they think. So I want to start with a discussion on the REAP program, if that's okay. Would it be possible for you to provide us a profile of what that customer looks like, or a breakdown? And the reason I ask is, are we talking about mostly single-family ratepayers or multifamily ratepayers?
Yeah, I think we can break that down for you. We'll give you some statistics on kind of what the persona of somebody who uses REAP, looks like.
And do you have a link right now between the REAP customer and the STEP program?
Absolutely. Yeah, customers who qualify for any assistance program automatically, we run them through STEP to see if they qualify. So all of our programs work together.
It's great to hear. So does that mean that the single-family customer doesn't have to come back to the REAP program?
I think typically even if they get weatherization, they still could need assistance. And as far as they're qualified from an income basis, which is 125% of the federal poverty guideline, then they have access to REAP, whether they get weatherized or not. You don't get weatherized and then get bumped out of the program, if that's what you're concerned about.
I'm sorry, no, I was just hoping it would reduce their energy burden and.
Well, I'm sure if they get weatherized, their bills will go down, by, I mean, up to 25, and again, if it's air conditioning, if it's ventilation, I mean, you may see some, over 30% drops in bills, but you still have people who are going to need the help.
Okay.
Especially
and
in today's environment where costs are going up across the board.
Yeah, thank you, Rudy. Is there a way to see the profile of that customer, and when it comes to the ones who are eligible for REAP, sort of what for STEP, what the outcomes of that are, and maybe some of the barriers you're hitting in weatherizing some of those homes, so that is there anything we can
Yes,
do to
ma'am.
help with that?
One of the things that we're trying to do as part of a recast weatherization program is to you have your standard about $4,500 a household program that will pay for all the things that we just talked about. But what we talked about during the STEP conversation was, I think Councilman Bravo brought this up. What if there are repairs that need to be made to the home to make them weatherization eligible? And so I think for what I would consider high utility burden customers, that's customers over 10% of their household income is going towards energy. We'd like to do more than the 4,500. And so that's one of the tweaks that we're going to try to make to weatherization going forward, is to be able to spend more dollars, when it's necessary to get a home weatherized. So I think that's one, change that really came from this body.
You, and I know I'm not the first person to come up with this about linking the STEP, the weatherization program, with our minor home repair or major home repair or under one roof program. So is that already in the works, or is that something that we need to help with?
I'm going to phone a friend, Indiana, here.
Our community engagement team is working with the city to see what we can do to link those programs. We're trying to do everything we can also to auto-enroll, so if we qualify, DHS and our teams work very closely to see how we can do auto-qualification. So I know the program that just launched on August 2nd, that's one of the big things your crew members are probably talking to your constituents about, and we continue as many programs as we can find. We will connect them all at the same time whenever we work with them.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Hartwick. And it'd be great to hear about that at our Municipal Utilities Committee meeting at some point, Chair. I also want to echo some of the comments brought forward by Councilwoman Castillo. I think especially about the debt that some of the customers carry and ways that we can resolve that. Is that what the ARPA funds, can the ARPA funds be used for that?
So we've pretty much, there's a process to go through to actually get the payments applied. So we're about 12 million in to actually getting payments applied, but we've got the whole $20 million spoken for. Indiana, if I speak out of turn, please just bump me out of the way here. But I believe that we've actually identified a need. Probably, if the dollars were available, we could probably spend another 19 million. Now, it's going to take us a while to get all that through the process, but the need is out there, and the $20 million that we've already gotten is spoken for.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to go back to the idea of a policy for when there is excess revenue. I did also mention this last time. Councilwoman Rocha Garcia has mentioned it, of course. So I don't know when would be an appropriate time to do that, but I don't think we should let too much time go forward before we discuss that while it's fresh in our minds. I think there's a whole host of things to choose from, including all those budget asks that we had last September or August that didn't make it into the budget. But I think we also want to be clear about how we forecast those revenues, and that is also an apples to apples comparison as we move forward. In terms of the excess revenue that we have this time, I think it's really hard once you tell the public that you're going to give them some money to say you're not going to give them that money anymore. But as someone who has been called the climate activist by the mayor, the climate activist on the council by the mayor, you're going to have to work harder to
I think I said scientist. You corrected me.
Oh, thank you. Who has worked in this field prior to coming to council. It is music to my ears to hear other council members talking about how important it is to do something about, even Councilman Perry, no, just kidding, about climate change and protecting our residents from the worst impacts of it. But but it is also sobering because that means that the impacts are so serious now that they are really part of our daily spoken language here. That said, I think $50 million, investing $50 million in climate protection efforts, whether it's weatherization to complement the STEP program or other things, would be a sea change in San Antonio. It would absolutely be a catalyst. But like I said, I just don't think we can do that to the ratepayers after we've told them we're going to give them that money. I'm extremely torn about that, but I do absolutely respect the sentiment and the policy direction that the councilman has proposed. And I know there's been a little bit of confusion about the proposal that I brought forward, so I would like a moment just to clarify. I am not proposing to use the excess revenue, the money slated at this point for a rebate. Like I said, if the customers have already heard that they're going to get that money, it's really hard to take it away or to reduce it. What I am proposing is that beginning this budget year and going forward, we set aside that 14% that comes from the STEP revenue, and that we dedicate that to resiliency, energy efficiency, sustainability issues. And I want to be clear, I want to establish this, I hope that the council would establish this as an ongoing fund, and that we consider it a floor, not a ceiling to our investments in these areas. I did send you a quick update because Eric pointed out to me some things that didn't make sense in my proposal, or something I didn't understand. And that's that if we want to start doing this fiscal year, the fiscal year that we're currently budgeting for, that means not waiting for the next STEP program to begin. I know I'm probably confusing things even more, but basically it means pulling the revenue that's already being collected from STEP. Rudy, there's something you want to say.
Well, it gets a little confusing, and I'm going to do my best to not don't? Okay. Well, the new STEP program really won't come into play until the next fiscal year. So Eric and I have had this conversation about when the funds would actually start getting collected.
And Rudy, that's what the councilwoman's talking about.
Yeah.
Is adjusting for that, because I shared with her the conversation we had about the timeline of new STEP versus old STEP. So I think she's, in her revised proposal, she's accommodated that.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thank you. Just
At least
wanted
I
to clarify
attempted to.
that because my people are paying attention.
Right. That's the audience that I'm clarifying this for, actually. And two, I had originally proposed a pilot program. I'm going to be a little bit more bold and say, let's do this for the life of the STEP program. Wow. Thank you. Time to
Thank you, Councilmember Sandoval. Councilmember Pelaez.
Yeah, with regards to the opinion of our constituents, I think all of us have a pretty good feel for what that is. But Eric, and Jeff, I wonder whether or not it's asking too much for us to actually ask the question of the public in the way that we ask the question of the public when we have a budget, right, to decide. How fast would it take to deploy a survey where we go to the public and say, these are the choices available to us, and we'd love for you to tell us which one you want? Because, on the one hand, I'm hearing 2 or 3 council members say, my constituents don't want $31. And then on the other, I'm hearing from one, council member saying that his constituents would like their money back. And so, when we're talking about $50 million here, which is, sea change money, maybe we ought to ask the public.
Certainly, Councilman, we could come up with a survey to give the public options to weigh in on. We could do that.
How fast could we do something like that?
We'll need to come back to you with a plan.
Okay. I'd be interested in hearing what the answer is, and whether or not that answer, jives with what I think the answer is. And we're pretty good at asking the public for opinions. And, if it's just something that we can do as a matter of course because SA Speak Up is up and running at all times, then, I'd invite my colleagues to express whether or not they'd like to go to the public and ask them for permission to spend their money in this way or that way.
I think it'd be important to make sure that we're giving the public options that are real under the position that we're in. So we could work on that and develop a plan pretty quickly or give you a report later on in the week.
So I've been thinking about poverty in San Antonio, and I was looking at our place as it ranks in as compared to the rest of the United States, and I was sad to learn that the median bank account balance for American Latinos is $2,000, and for African Americans it's $1,500. You can imagine that that for retirees who are people of color, it doesn't get much better. And so if you look at education levels, those Americans without high school diplomas or who have just reached the high school diploma level have a median bank account of $1,000. So, when you take into consideration that $31 could be a copay for life-saving medicine and $31 could be a copay for a doctor's visit, I find it really hard to hear people call a return of $31 to anybody in that situation instant gratification. I think playing fast and loose and with those words, woe be to the elected official who dismisses people's pain like that. When you consider that we've also been talking about insulin copays. Insulin copays on average in the United States are $54, right? Without your insulin injection, you die. And the people in District 8, they can afford insulin. And for maybe them, $31 is not a big deal. And considering that every single person at this table who's an elected official makes about $45,000 from the city in a salary, $31 is really probably not a big deal to us when you also consider that the majority of us subsidize that salary with whatever our spouses earn or the night work that we do at Our Lady of the Lake or, at our law practices. And so we, $31 is not a big deal, maybe to us on the city council, but, there's ladies upstairs who are cleaning our offices as we speak for whom $31 may be the difference between getting insulin or getting their kid to the doctor. And so I'm certainly not going to go and characterize this as instant gratification to any San Antonian who is facing this. And anyway, I think those words are gross. So I will tell you that I'm generally in support of giving the people's money back to the people since it's their money. But again, I'll reiterate, we've got a very serious domestic violence problem in San Antonio that we have yet to adequately fund. And we have women and kids who are being killed and assassinated more than is acceptable. One is more than is acceptable, but we're seeing them by the dozens every single year. We have not adequately addressed this problem. We've talked a lot about it. We've dedicated some ARPA money to it, but we've got an opportunity here to make a sea change investment in domestic violence. I'm sad that I'm not hearing anybody stand up for those victims, but maybe hopefully there'll be another day when we can do that. But those are my comments. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Pelaez. Councilmember Sandoval.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to close my comments out. I'm actually not that good at timing it with the timer. That was I wasn't quite done. So regarding the proposal that I have for next year's revenues, not the revenues that have already been collected, there is a small problem in that we don't know where that money is going to come from right now, so it would have to be found somewhere in the proposed budget. I've had this conversation with Eric to some extent, and I have asked him to help me come up with some options that they would vet and that I would have to come and bring forward to the council. So, or I'm going to ask him now, actually.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And just to reiterate what the proposal is, it's not just feel-good money for climate. It is what Councilman Bravo said, leveraging funding from the federal government, small grants to community organizations, hopefully in all districts, and most importantly, urban heat island mitigation, which is, of course, driving up some of our bills. In fact, you were talking about how you never thought it would be this hot in San Antonio, and this past summer, or the summer that we're experiencing, I kind of felt like a prisoner in my own home because it was just so hot outside, and so I hope that's not every year going forward. And yeah, where I live, there's not a tree on my property, and there's not. That's not my fault. That's the fault of people who lived there 20 years before me. But there's and also there's a lot of pavement. Fortunately, my roof is white. It would be a lot worse if it weren't. But I do hope to be able to take my child on a walk someday when we're not burning up. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Sandoval. Councilmember Courage.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we've had some really important ideas that have been expressed around this meeting. And obviously, we need to sit down and talk about this some more before we come to any kind of final decision. But I just want to stand by my real strong belief that this is City of San Antonio funds. Already, we've got most of it in the bank. And I have a hard time giving San Antonio revenue dollars to businesses or individuals outside of the City of San Antonio. I just can't justify that myself. And so I hope that as we look at this, we're going to focus on making sure any benefit that's received from the city giving its resources is going to go to city residents. And I say, too, I don't think it needs to go to businesses. Businesses write that off. It is a tax deduction. It's part of their expense for providing whatever service they have. And just the thought of giving $100,000 to 20 or 30 or 40 businesses, or a couple of thousand other businesses getting hundreds or a couple of $1,000s each, will not sit well, I think, with people in my district or with people in this city. I think we need to focus on putting this money to the best use for the residents and the citizens of San Antonio. I like the ideas that's been presented about trying to use more of this money, for example, to help with energy efficiency. I think that's a great idea. You know, we're talking about there being money in the STEP program for energy efficiency. We're talking about between 40 and 45 million in our bond program that's going to go to rehab existing buildings. We need to put those two together, and maybe part of $4 or $5 million can go from the city to add to that additional funding for making these rehab jobs more energy efficient. So we're targeting it from two ways: with CPS funds, with money that we may provide out of this largesse, if I can call it that, and with money that's going to be in the bond program. But at the same time, I think we can still provide direct funding to the people in the city. And, you know, my colleague mentioned, you know, people are going to want their money back. They paid for it. Well, Valero is making billions off of profits, and the cost of gas has gone way up. Were customers overpaid? I don't know. You have to ask Valero. But I don't think the customers expect Valero to give them back some of that money. So why would we expect that we would give customers back some of that money, particularly if they don't even live in the city of San Antonio? So, you know, I think there's a lot more to explore, and I'd like to see us explore it more. But I really believe if you give someone $75 as opposed to 10 or 12 or 19 or 24, that's the average in their district, or 50, I think they appreciate and have much more use for that money than we can even discuss. And so I think the more that we can put back into our citizens' pockets out of this additional funding, the better we serve the people in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Courage. Councilmember Perry.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, uh-oh. Just have to push back on my colleague a little bit. Businesses are ratepayers also. They have suffered just as much as residential customers. And businesses, yeah, there are tax write-offs out there, but utility bills are not write-offs. They pay that and they pass that bill on to the customers, which are us purchasing whatever goods and services that they're providing. So I think I'm speaking up for the business community. They are a ratepayer, just like anybody else in this city and surrounding communities, as well as cities within our city, Hollywood Park, Alamo Heights, Terrell Heights, it goes on and on and on. So I think, again, we need to look at everybody as customers. If they're paying an electricity bill, they need to be taken into this equation. But this equation, as I mentioned at the very beginning, didn't show the full story. And I'd really like to see that, what that is, with that full story, with the 75 million. And then go from there. So, yeah, I just think everybody that has been paying into this overpayment should get their fair share back, whatever that mix is, going back to businesses and the communities. That's all, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Perry. Councilmember McKee Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. I, for one, am shocked that none of us agree. I will actually, I support the idea of doing a survey of sorts, and I was actually going to use some of my own resources to do a survey of sorts. And so if we can not do that and the city will do it, I will gladly, I would be supportive of that. But I was very critical of our survey, of our budget survey process, and I want to be very clear that we need to ask the question in the realest ways possible. And so I think that would include something like an interactive element where they can input the amount of their July bill and find out how much they'd receive back. I would be receptive to that, because then every person is making a decision based off of their reality, not based of some possibility that they could get $50 or $70 back when really they're getting $8. I just don't believe that we can ask questions of the public and only give them some information. I would also like, before that happens, I would like for us to have the executive session so we can determine what all of our options are and include that in the survey, because if we don't have to give $4 million to the 40 largest users, that is a huge impact, and that could make the difference between someone feeling comfortable with a rebate versus not. I would also like us to explore whether or not direct assistance is possible. I'm still not sold on a CPS credit, and I feel if people are given the opportunity to do what they will with that $31, $40, however much it is, that's, I feel much more comfortable with that. That is all.
Thank you, Councilmember McKee Rodriguez. Councilmember Bravo.
Thank you, Mayor. Dave, can you try and pull up that signs of heat stress poster? Let me say that first of all, we need to be accurate in how we discuss this. And Councilman Perry talked about that customers overpaid. Rudy, were CPS Energy customers overbilled this summer?
Absolutely not, sir. I mean, our rates are pretty straightforward.
Right.
We collect revenue to run our system. Fuel is part of that, which we have to prove up to the Public Utility Office every month. Before it's actually, the rates are changed, we collect the money, we send the city up, they're up to 14%. So customers weren't overcharged, they were charged the appropriate amount per our rates.
Right. So I saw the presentation, I don't know if it was maybe in the July CPS Energy Board meeting, looking at the June bills. And the June 22 bills, on average, were 50% higher than the June 2021 bills, right?
It depends. I mean, mine was 30% higher, but it's 30 to 50% is probably about right.
Well, in the presentation I saw, they were, on average, the residential bills were 50% higher. And I saw that exactly 50% of that rate increase was due to people using more energy, right? And so like, if you're a SAWS customer and you put your water sprinkler on and you go out of town for a month and you come back, you're gonna be billed more because you used more, right?
That's correct.
If Councilman Perry goes to Ruth's Chris for dinner and he orders 2 steaks, he can't go back and say, hey, I'm only one person, you can only charge me for 1 dinner if you ate 2 steaks. You know, that, you're gonna, if you use more, you pay more. And so it's, yes, people are struggling. Yes, the bills are higher, but that doesn't mean people were overbilled. And we need to get this under control so that people don't have to use so much energy to maintain their homes at a comfortable temperature, because this is what they're dealing with right here. You know, we're warning people that you're gonna if you go outside, you're gonna have the inability to think clearly. We're worried that people are gonna die of heat exhaustion or heat stroke. And this is the new normal, right? And that's why we need to take this seriously. I mean, I look at Houston, the oil and gas capital of the world, and they weren't taking these issues seriously, and then they got hit by Hurricane Harvey. And all of a sudden, the culture changed over there. And people were talking about these issues. And you see movement over there. And so we've seen this summer, and it's time for us to take real action and not just say, hey, you know, we want a guaranteed revenue stream and it's going to be a little bit, and we're going to start to do something. We need to do something that's catalytic. We need to take a big step now, a big shot in the arm, because I don't want to be back here having this conversation the next summer and the next summer and the next summer saying, well, what do? We could give everybody $30 back after we kicked them in the teeth with their bills. I don't want to have that conversation again. I want to take this seriously now, and I want to start protecting our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bravo. Councilmember Castillo.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to be sure that we emphasize the fact that when we talk about inflation and the cost of fuel, that it's primarily corporate greed, right? Exxon, Valero have received record profits of over $25 billion. That's not inflation, that is greed. And I think when we're having the conversation about equitable rates and recognizing, and thank you, Rudy, for clarifying that our CPS customers have not been overpaying, right? They're paying the rates that was approved by the city council, and they're not being overcharged. This body approved that rate to charge them more, and here we are with these excess fees. My request is that I would hope to see the $5 million for REAP increase to 6.7 to settle those critical care accounts and those folks who are at risk of being disconnected. With that, if there is a survey put forward, my request is that the city provides my office with tablets to go door to door to survey my constituents. When we look at the SA Speak Up for the 2023 budget survey, the majority of the senior constituents, for example, were primarily, the highest percentage were white participants when we're a majority Latino city. So there are some discrepancies, and I think we can improve the process, and I would like to review the questions being put forward to the public before we go public with a survey. Because as we all know, digital divide exists, and I want to be sure that we are getting everyone's input in the process. And again, right, I think when we enter the budget conversation, there's opportunity for us to invest in resiliency, weatherization, and I look forward to supporting the request of Ana and Mario as we enter those budget conversations to ensure that we're meeting that need. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Castillo. We are going to have an executive session here in just a moment, and I know we do have another discussion about this topic before we go to the budget. So look forward to that conversation. But let me just sum up in a few reflections. I won't try to summarize anyone's discussion themselves, but first of all, this conversation did not start as a result of this windfall. The need to deal with the impacts of climate and how they impact individual families with regard to weatherization, with regard to climate impacts generally. I mean, that is one of the reasons why STEP began over 10 years ago. And that is one of the reasons precisely why STEP has continued based on our conversations at council. So with respect to the additional revenue that has been received in FY22 as a result of the increased costs of energy during the summer, this is not the beginning of the conversation, nor do I think it's the end of the conversation and the solution to those issues that we've talked about. The second is, I do also take issue with the fact that this might be characterized by some as overcharging. It's not. CPS Energy is a cost of service business. What is received is programmed. What is needed for revenue is what is programmed. The addition of what we're talking about is that 14% increment that the city receives as owner. That 14% is in lieu of taxes, so we can do paving of streets, sidewalks, parks. That money on an annual basis is in the police department and the fire department and every other one of the core services that our residents expect from the city. What's different here in this situation is that we budgeted and we passed and we have programmed and implemented a FY22 budget. That's what's here. During the course of this year, this summer, there was a windfall in that 14% because of the high cost of energy. So going into FY23, we have a significantly higher fund balance related to that CPS Energy. Does that mean our residents' expectations of what they want from the city has changed? I don't think so. They didn't just start expecting us to deal with climate. Otherwise, we wouldn't have passed step. Otherwise, we wouldn't have committed ourselves to a cap. It could be argued, and I'm first to state that we are not going fast enough in our climate goals, and we're working towards accelerating some of those objectives. Is the solution to that more revenue? I don't know the answer to that. That was my first question to you, Rudy, about how much more funding can we push through the weatherization pipe to make it more beneficial to our customers? Are we lacking for funding in that department? Is that why? You don't have to answer. I'm asking rhetorically. Is more money the solution to that issue? If you ask me today from where I'm sitting, I don't think the answer is yes. There's a whole slew of issues related to making our homes more climate resilient. I mean, frankly, if we had surplus revenue, I think that the programs related to home improvement, home repair for some of our lower income residents and those homes that are on the verge of code enforced demolition, to Councilmember Castillo's point, is a great place to look. But that's not the conversation we're having today. It's about how do we deal with the CPS revenue windfall. So in my estimation, and again, this is not the end of the conversation, with respect to how we have budgeted, and we will budget the FY23 year, are our constituents expecting something different just because we have significantly more revenue? I don't think the answer is yes. I think one of the keys to the solution, or one of the keys to us addressing more comprehensively the climate impacts that everyone is talking about and how difficult it is for residents, particularly vulnerable residents of our community, to cope during extreme heat and cold, relates to ensuring we change the status quo, which is why I believe strongly in the proposal that Councilmember Sandoval has put forward, not as a way to deal with this CPS issue in isolation, but how we deal with the issue of making ourselves more resilient moving forward. That is an operational change. That is a change of status quo. If we're looking for sea change, we change the way we do business. And that's a change in the way we do business. It's not just simply one-time source of revenue. So again, just summarizing my reflections, I think for me, this conversation about excess, I won't even say excess, the additional increment that the city has received because of high energy costs during the summer, if that's the conversation we're having, we need to figure out how to effectively and as equitably as possible relieve the pain that our residents have felt, of course, within the regulatory framework. So that's where I'm going to end up on this, I believe, as we move forward. So I'm looking for as an effective and fair way to get that surplus revenue back to the residents who generated it. And I hope that that's the conversation that we continue to have. So with that, I think we're going to go into exec. The time is 4:26 p.m. on Tuesday, August 16, 2022. The City Council of the City of San Antonio will now meet in executive session and consult with the City Attorney's Office pursuant to Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code.